Hey, this is Fred Ottman, Tugboat Typhoon, the Shockmaster, the B-A-double-D, Big Steel Man. And the card is subject to change. Watch it.
Welcome back to the show!
Welcome back to the show!
And now, your hosts of the Card Subject to Change podcast, the For Frequency's Sake Tag Team Champions of the World, the Wizard CZ, and Never Wrong Nick Bull.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Card Subject to Change podcast, the podcast by the fan, for the fan. Of course, I am your host, Never Wrong, Nick Bull. We are powered by Low Pies Pizza, built by Durham Modeling, colored by Ryan Allison Tattoo. Bring you along here tonight, bring you my tag team partner. He is undoubtedly the oar that steers this ship, the rudder that steers this ship. He keeps us on course. He is the one. He is the only. He is my tag team champion, co-champion partner of the For Frequency's Sake Network, the Wizard CZ. Wiz, how you doing, bud?
And I am doing as well as can be expected with the news we got today. We're not gonna delve into Terry Bollea, the person, because we're going to look back at the fond times of Hulk Hogan, the character on this episode, who is sadly no longer with us. Former six-time WCW World Champion, former six-time WWF, WWE Champion, won the Royal Rumble twice, two-time Hall of Famer, once on his own and once with the NWO. Of course, we are talking about the late Hulk Hogan, who, as I said, is no longer with us tonight.
Undoubtedly, unparalleled, the biggest professional wrestling name in history. I would venture to guess, if you asked 100 people on the street before today how many people knew Hulk Hogan, and I would say 85% of the people would know who he was. Like, everybody knew him. So this is a big deal. At 71 at home, cardiac arrest. For the most part, we knew Hulk was banged up, but had recovered from surgeries and seemed to be in good health. So, dude, I was as shocked as everybody else this morning. My phone started blowing up. People texting me and sending me messages, and I was doing work things and kind of ignored it for 5 minutes, and then looked back at it. I'm like, what is going on? But he's undoubtedly, the greatest professional wrestler of all time for what he did for the business. He's impacted everything. They wouldn't be doing WrestleManias in football stadiums on two different nights if it wasn't for him. They wouldn't be doing SummerSlams in football stadiums on two different nights if it wasn't for him. And I read something earlier today. One other wrestling death would be as shocking, and that'd be Vince McMahon, right? Like, those two, right now are the two biggest names ever in professional wrestling, and for what they did, they're mega stars. So one of those guys passed away today. That, of course, that is Hulk Hogan. Ricky, thank you for tuning in. Did either of you guys meet him? No, I
was not.
I did not either. I never had a chance. Never had a chance to meet him, but I have a friend who does, and this friend has helped CZ and I out on the show on several occasions, whether it's at the Sandra Lee Memorial car show, helping us shoot stuff, or it's at a convention. He's been a friend of mine for several years. We date back 20-some years. CZ just recently met Don, and when I say recently, in the last couple years. But Don is a great friend of mine, and we're going to bring in here Don Feldman, Don is a huge Hulkamania fan. I'm telling you this. I was driving down the road today. I heard the news, Don, and thank you for joining us. And I'm like, of all my friends, I think you are the one that loves Hogan the most.
Been a
So
big
tell
fan.
me what you felt like when you heard the news.
Oh man, it was sad. It was hard to believe, because the wrestling rumors are rampant out there, and we kind of heard some stuff leading up where, hey, he's not in the best health, but you're hoping that's not true. But then at the same time, he's getting ready to do that Real American Freestyle, and we just saw Eric Bischoff last weekend in Waterloo, Iowa, and he's sure promoting that business, and we're cheering him on. And from what I'm thinking, going into this weekend, into the week, is like, all right, he's maybe in the hospital recovering from a back surgery or a surgery. I guess I don't know which one, but I was expecting to see him at the end of August as they launched that Real American Freestyle thing, and we definitely wish him the best. But when you get that news, you can't really believe it. But it sinks in pretty fast. So a sad day.
Well, Don, I think I can comment here for not only CZ, myself, but Chris, Loritzen Stripe. Chris, I don't know if it's Chris. Is that Chris Jr. or Chris Senior? CZ.
Senior.
Senior. Stripes. How you doing, bud? This one hurts, guys. I'm at a loss. We're all relatively the same age. We're all within about 5-6 years of each other. And it's like, Don, you've said this to me several times. We always talk about the past and your childhood. This is a large, if your childhood, Don, was a pie graph, how much of it was Hulk Hogan?
Man, I think he drew everybody in to wrestling, at least got them in the door. So I think everybody was a Hulkamania at one time or the other. And I think it was larger than life that Hogan, you think of his name, it was probably bigger than the brand WWF. Now, I know that he needed that big machine to push him, but one thing we're talking about today, we're talking about some of our favorite matches, and I reached out to a friend after you asked me that question, and he brought up AWA Bronco Wrinkle, and how that had that false finish, but that crowd was going wild, and that was pre-WWE day or WWF days, and everybody's got a favorite match. But even in AWA, he sure was drawing big crowds, and he had the electricity, and he had the Hulkamanias, pre-WWF, so it's huge.
Well, he was big in Japan as well, right, Don?
Yeah, Japan, definitely. He had a big falling over there. And I mean, if you ever think about it, for this podcast, Hogan's the perfect example of a market life cycle curve where you got the introduction, you got the growth, you got the maturity, and eventually you're going to have the decline. But that growth and that maturity from 1984, 85 to 88, 89, we'll probably never see a growth like that in the pro wrestling career again in our life. John Cena, and they do a great job, but just to bring in that many fans and draw millions of viewers and get prime time on NBC, that is huge.
You mentioned Japan. Looking through the facts that I have pulled up on Wikipedia, he had the match of the year in '91 against Junichiro Tenryu. I hope I pronounced that right.
Tenryu, yep.
Tenryu. Yep. Back in '91 in December. That was the match of the year in Japan. But of course, we all know him from his time in WWF, the quote-unquote golden era, and of course, most memorable for me during the Attitude Era when the NWO was formed. And our good friend Rob Nova, the Nova of Cass, piece of his childhood died of mine too, Rob. I feel that big time.
And then if I could add a couple things for the Quad Cities on how big it is, since it's heavily in the Quad Cities. I want to put this in perspective because you probably won't see this online on X or Facebook, but something I lived through. We were excited, 2017 when we heard the Young Bucks got their T-shirts, both the Young Bucks and Bullet Club, and what was a hot topic that, hey, here's Ring of Honor, and going back to Japan, here's New Japan. They got this T-shirt deal in there. But the first T-shirt deal in a store, you could walk into a JCPenney's in your local mall, whether it be Muscatine Mall or South Park Mall, and there would be a Hulk Hogan T-shirt. And that opened up the door for a lot of other wrestlers and made them a lot of money too, because another T-shirt that caught my eye was the Captain Lou. But just to go through your stores and know you're going to find it. And then I was talking with a friend real quick before this, and he said, yeah, you know, it was so big too. And back then they had catalogs that, you know, Hogan had his line of clothes and the action figures, the LJNs, and everything available to buy straight from JCPenney's before there was an Amazon. So I think that was pretty huge. And then another Quad City story too. We all love our River Bandits here in the Quad Cities in the John O'Donnell Stadium. They used to have wrestling there, and Ted DiBiase was one of the questions I sprung upon him was, hey, who was you? You know, and Ted DiBiase was a great wrestler. Yeah, I think everybody can agree with that. Really good, make great matches, poised to be world champion for WWF in his prime. I said, Ted DiBiase, who is your favorite opponent? And I'm thinking like Bret Hart, maybe for technical, or Macho Man Randy Savage for the title run. But he said, hands down, Hulk Hogan. Whenever I wrestled him, you know, speaking of the house shows, that's when I threw the most money. I knew when I was working with Hulk Hogan on the whole house show loop, I was going to make my big pay and save that money and enjoy.
Don, did you ever see Hogan in the Quad Cities?
Hogan in the Quad Cities. Yeah, I mean, there's a poster up there too. So we got really lucky. There's the poster too, and I'll touch on that. So, you know, you as a kid, you know, I go into my first shows at Palmer Auditorium. Then eventually it went to Warden Fieldhouse and then the Mark of the Quad Cities. You know, the first time, you know, everything's awesome. You see the WWF ring that you see on TV. You see some of your superstars, and you always dream of seeing Hulk Hogan and, you know, a Piper's Pit. After a while, you know, you didn't know it at the time, but, you know, we were probably the C town, maybe if we were lucky, the B town. But Hogan didn't come around for a long time. But in 1991, this is going to be huge for those that aren't familiar with the WWF history in the Quad Cities. There was the show was supposed to be, I think it was Peoria, maybe it was Champaign, but a couple hours south. But they had to cancel it down there. So, like in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, they had to move it on their tour circle. So they moved it to Warden Fieldhouse. So we got Hulk Hogan versus Ric Flair, and that was way before the internet. So you're kind of thinking to yourself that, hey, I'm seeing this dream match. You know, I went through the Pro Wrestling Illustrated, and I would buy all those. And you know, they would do fantasy booking through the magazines back then. And they said, what would happen if Ric Flair, NWA champion, versus Hulk Hogan, WWF world champion? And then I'm like, holy cow, this is coming live in 1991. You're seeing some of the vignettes and stuff like that. And Ric Flair brought the big gold with him. And then there's the big gold, and there's Ric Flair in Wharton Fieldhouse taking on Hulk Hogan in the main event. And that was just huge. So the only time I've seen him in the Quad Cities was in 1991. And I believe in his WWF face run, that was the only time he was in the Quad Cities. Because he didn't make Great American Bash 1997. We were hoping for Sting versus Hogan at that event, but we got DDP, Diamond Dallas Page versus Savage, which was great.
Yeah, both you guys were there. I didn't get a ticket to that show, and I'm bummed about it.
Nick, guess what?
I'm bummed I missed that Wharton show too.
1991. Guess how much front row would it cost for that?
$15.
Yeah, can you see that? It's $15 exactly. Yeah, perfect.
No, I was just I can't see up. I mean, I can see a lot on that poster, but I could not see the prices. I swear.
Yep.
That'd be my gift.
Yeah, the writing is a little bit too small to see, 15, but definitely wanted to bring 15.
You. I mean, you know, I would. You know, we're here, Card Subject to Change podcast by the fan for the fan. Of course, we are talking about the immortal Hulk Hogan, who passed away today at the age of 71. Undoubtedly the biggest pro wrestler of all time, you know, biggest crossover star of all time. You know, I know Rock can have his box office numbers and whatnot. Stripes, yep, he saw Hogan and Flair as well at Wharton. So there we go. Gosh, I know I nagged my parents. They probably got so sick and tired of me nagging that I couldn't get to that show. But with that being said, you know, the biggest crossover star of all time. I mean, Rocky III, you know, I mean, he was the first big time crossover star. I know wrestlers had been in movies before, but not to that level. And a Hulk Hogan fact that I love is the night before WrestleMania 1, which WrestleMania 1 was like on Sunday in the afternoon, correct?
Right. Yeah, they were early, like matinees, they called them back then.
Sure. What I love about this is the night before, Hulk Hogan and Mr. T host Saturday Night Live.
Yep.
And then, they probably didn't go right to bed, get some sleep, and then that's crazy to me. That wouldn't happen today. And that's so cool. The rock and wrestling thing. But Don, we brought you on here. This is Don Feldman. He is a friend of the podcast, big buddy of ours, great wrestling guy, big Hogan fan. Ricky Lee says, I remember seeing Andre and Paul Orndorff at Wharton. So,
yeah, that was amazing feud. And I actually, I know we're all sad. Everybody listening to this podcast today is sad, but we also want to celebrate the life and the career. So I did I do know a quote, and thank you for bringing up the Paul Orndorff. I love that feud from when he turned on them to Superstars to the Saturday Night's Main Event, and then accumulate into the steel cage match in January 1987. And I remember the promo from there, and I'll cut it off to the end, but Hogan said, here's what we're going to say. He said, let it be the judge. And if a mere mortal man like Hulk Hogan goes down, let it be. But Hulkamania will live forever. So as we're doing this podcast and coming together, we're going to make sure we're doing our part that Hulkamania does live on forever. And it's so big that it's going to, but we're going to definitely feel that fire.
That being said, let's kind of go around the room, and those of you tuned in, leave in the comments as well. What was your favorite Hulk Hogan moment?
Do we just get one CZ?
If you want to mark several, that's perfectly fine.
I mean, I would say this. I'll start with, you got to say Hogan Andre. I know some people knocked that match. It wasn't a 5-star match. But if you think about that, going off, and thank you for the Orndorff comment, going off the Orndorff comment, that was in January 1987. They didn't have any plans for WrestleMania in March. They were able to say, hey, let's have this match with Orndorff, which was huge at the time, in a steel cage, first televised steel cage on prime time, or on TV probably in general. And they have that match. Then they gear up. They say, hey, we're going to get Pontiac Silverdome, 93,173 people, and we're going to get Hogan versus Andre. Now we're going to make Andre the bad guy, and we're going to sell $93,000 tickets in less, or maybe over 2 months. That's unheard of, especially back then. WWF was probably doing 20, 30,000, and they're saying we're going to go 90,000 in 2 months and get 90,000 fans in Detroit to watch it. So I would say Hogan versus Andre. You also got to say Hogan versus Savage. All right. That was a great feud. Everybody loved the Mega Powers. 87 drew the fans in. I think going back to that market curve, that's where he's hit in maturity. And it brought it into 88. You had the Mega Powers, which was great storyline, but ultimately set up this match at WrestleMania 5. And then I would also put, for the third, I would put that Hogan Orndorff steel cage from January 1987, Saturday Night's Main Event. Plus, seeing some of the clips online, we know it's great, but Rock versus Hogan, we're going to look back at that when Rock's in his 60s or 70s and say Hogan wrestled The Rock, and they were both in great shape. And that crowd, holy cow. The Rock was the good guy, the Hogan was the bad guy. And when Rock hit the rock bottom and Hulk Hogan kicked out, hulked up, and that crowd just went absolutely wild. I could watch that moment over and over, just that 2-minute clip over and over again. But let's
see what's yours.
Yeah. So I can't pick just one. Don mentioned the Mega Powers WrestleMania 5. That is what brought me into wrestling. That will always be the moment that crystallizes my love of this business, this sport that we're all in love with here. But I got to go with the big turn, the start of the NWO. Who's the third man? That was a moment that changed wrestling forever.
And how ironic, we were all in the same room this past weekend at the Tragos Gable Wrestling Hall of Fame weekend, where Eric Bischoff spoke for 90 minutes about Bash at the Beach 96 and how he came up with it and how long and who knew about it. And just a few days later, the linchpin in the whole deal is gone. And I've seen a picture online today before I get to this comment. Seen a picture online of that moment at Bash at the Beach. It's Hall, Nash, Okerlund, and Hogan, and there's only one of those four remaining. So it's just kind of crazy when you think about that. For frequency's sake, chiming in here for FFSQC, wrestling-wise, as a man of a certain age, Hogan versus Rock, also Mr. America. Yeah, I mean, Hogan had such a long career, Don, that he's going to matter. His matches are going to matter to different people. I'll tell you what I think. What sticks out for me is definitely WrestleMania 3, because one, got him on the map. 2 was ambitious but not well received. 3 pushed them into the stratosphere, and the rest is history, as they say. And those 2 guys, it was around those 2. I know there were great matches on that card, and like Don said, I know the match isn't critically acclaimed, but that match right there is the biggest match in modern and pro wrestling history, like it or not. I always think of NWO Hogan. How cool was NWO Hogan come out to Voodoo Child? We hadn't seen this before. And he embraced the heeldom. And, Cena should have watched Hogan, study Hogan in the NWO, because it didn't seem to bother Hogan that he was heel. The money was still coming in. But my favorite is, you're talking Mount Rushmores, the entrance theme, Real American, is the all-time greatest entrance music.
Yep.
The all-time
I've had that playing
greatest
through my head
entrance music. I don't care if you like Hogan or not. I don't care. It's the greatest entrance music of all time.
And Rick Derringer, he passed away this summer, right? If I remember right.
He passed away within the last few months.
And then, Nick, can I add one thing to your and CZ's list here?
Absolutely.
When we look at the landscape and how big wrestling is right now, it's TKO making billions and getting these billion-dollar contracts. Let's look at the landscape. Hogan, WrestleMania 1, we all heard the story. Vince bet everything, and if he didn't make it, he'd go bankrupt. 2, it was held in 3 cities. 3, we've been talking about, I got the poster up there, 93,000. All right, that's WrestleMania, and we know how big of a phenomenon that is now, where that's going to sell out 60, 100,000 tickets just by the name WrestleMania. A lot of that's Hogan. There's always been the debate was it Vince McMahon or Hogan, and you can go back and forth on that, but Hogan definitely played a pivotal role. But let's look at the landscape going back to that. WrestleMania, just what we have today. After WrestleMania in '87, they started Survivor Series. Hogan was the main event on that, where Andre kind of got the win back in the Survivor Series match and put Bam Bam over. Hogan got to launch Survivor Series, and we talked about the Mega Powers '88. He had the Mega Powers on the team. Let's go one step further. We go to SummerSlam's 1988. Mega Powers again. I sound like a broken record, but hey, SummerSlam's launched. You got these. I know there's a lot of big pay-per-views, but there's the big 4. 3 of them Hogan main evented probably 20 times out of 25. Royal Rumble, I think they tried to build some other characters, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Big John Studd, but then after Studd's Royal Rumble victory, then they gave it to Hogan in 90 and 91 before Flair came there in 92, which, I think that might be a huge miss. I know they say they didn't gel well, but that 1992, we could have had Hogan versus Flair at WrestleMania 8, and we never got it. So also got his house show footage on the Peacock now, the form of WWE. So,
well, CZ, we've kind of buried the lead here because Don has done such a great job delving down the history of Hogan here. Don's met Hogan. So, Don, I want to hear all about the time you met him. What it was like. What'd you say to him? How'd that go down? Where and when did this take place?
So Hogan, he frequented the national convention, card convention, and it's the baseball card convention in Chicago. So I saw his name on the roster. I'm like, okay, I have to get up there. So in 2019, I made the trip up there. Now, Hogan is a legend, and that's why we're here discussing him today. So to bring Hogan in, they have to have a lot of people go through the line. So they had a pro photo line, and that's the one I was in. So you got to go through the line, and when I was going through the line, you don't know what to expect. You're going to meet your, the person that you watched tons of wrestling on when you were a kid and had the action figures and the DVD or VHS, the magazines and stuff. And then when I get through line, first person I see as I get close is Jimmy Hart. Jimmy Hart got to travel with him quite a lot. When I got to meet him, he was exactly. And then when I got, he goes, "What you want to do, brother?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's do the front double bicep pose." And he's like, so I did that, and he did it. He's like, "Wait a minute, that's my gimmick, brother." So that was 2019. He was still looking great, still going good. I know he probably couldn't take a bump, but he definitely was ring shape. So it was really cool to meet him. But it was, just the trying to get 10,000, 20,000 fans. Still got a great line 35 years later through, I got a minute. So that was pretty cool. Last summer, I got to go to his beach shop too. I got to, I was in Orlando, and it wasn't the big one, but that was really cool to see all the, his stuff from his wrestling days and stuff down there. So that beach shop in Orlando was a really cool quick trip visit too. So that was last summer.
And they were just getting ready to open one in Pigeon Forge as well.
That's right.
So I mean, one of the tourist capitals of the United States. So I mean, Hulk Hogan had that much reach when it came to name and likeness and being able to make money. The guy drew and he made money, and that's when it comes down to it in wrestling. That's what matters, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Don, what's your lasting memory here of Hulk before we wrap up?
All-time memory? Ooh, that's a tough one.
Or your lasting one. When you think of Hulk Hogan, what's the first thing you think of?
I don't know. I mean, you see some of those collages of the 80s. You'll see like Michael Jackson, Michael Jordan, Mike Tyson. Hulk Hogan's up there. There was a lot of icons in the 80s. I think Hulk Hogan fits, I don't know if we call him Mount Rushmore because I probably listed 6 or 7, but you got 10 huge icons of the 1980s. And the 80s was a great decade to, start the 90s, but, a lot of people remember that as the true icons. Hogan's in that list, rightfully so, and he earned a spot. And he brought wrestling to the map, kind of like I mentioned, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, Royal Rumble. Hogan was a driving force behind that, so when we watch a pay-per-view, it was those 4 that, the marketing plan of Vince McMahon, but the drive of Hogan, that these pay-per-views we watch were the foundation of Hogan. Pure icon of the 80s and 90s, is what I would say.
Our friend Jesse from the Rejects podcast saying that Hogan's work in Japan is amazing. If you haven't seen those matches, go look them up. I definitely agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
I got to get, behind the curtain here. I've got Super Sunday queued up. I am looking forward to watching this Hogan Bockwinkel match tonight. I kind of been on an AWA kick the last few weeks. Read Joyce Poshin's book. She's going to be on here in a few weeks, maybe in a few weeks. She's going to be on here. Excellent book. If you love AWA and if you love Quad City wrestling history, man, she has got you covered. I was excited to meet her this past weekend up in Waterloo, but we're thought we'd hop on here tonight, talk about the late great Hulk Hogan, large part of our childhood. I mean, CZ, I don't know your lasting memory, but mine's Hogan Warrior. That's what I think of when I hear Hogan and how big that was and how crushed I was when he got beat. But
I always will go back to the Mega Powers, man. That's going to stand out the most for me because, like I said, that's what brought me in.
And I think kind of to put a bow on too, if I had to put a memory, I would say WrestleMania 3, riding in that cart. The cart was jacked up about 15 feet in the air, doing his poses and going out the winged eagle. That's how I think he would, the fans want to see him go out today.
Absolutely. Thunderlips. Let's talk his acting career. Dude set the bar for The Rock's and Cena with an underrated acting career. Well, he did. I mean, he had Thunder in Paradise. Don, did you watch that series, Thunder in Paradise?
Maybe not Santa with muscles, but yeah, the Thunder in Paradise a little bit. No Holds Barred, great. And, you know, and the other thing, too, the great acting career, correct me if I'm wrong, but Sylvester Stallone specifically, who was a huge star in the 80s as well, specifically picked Hulk Hogan for that role. You know, Hogan was in the WWF under Vince McMahon Sr., a star, but, you know, Sylvester Stallone saw the talent and the charisma that we see and definitely helped light his career up.
Absolutely.
And exposing wrestling to a whole different audience. I mean, that's what he did. He had such a far reach on things. I'll always, you know, I'm going to leave here on a positive, unless you got CZ. I got one on a positive note here. You know, the night that he got screwed over by Earl Hebner's twin brother, his shoulders were up. Andre pinned him 1, 2, 3, wins the belt, and then that promo backstage. They got the plastic surgery. That makes me laugh. I just think it's so funny at this point, you know, to think that pro wrestling referees would get plastic surgery. But it's great. That's what we love about wrestling.
Well, let me ask you this. Is this the first botch that we can point to in history where Hogan had the Hebner up and he went to throw him and you overthrew Hebner and DiBiase and the Giant couldn't catch him? So poor Hebner landed on the ground, but you throw him by about 2 feet. And I know you're kind of like, I know this stuff is scripted, but they went a little too far. I'm like, they must have had a lot of padding on the floor behind those two because he launched them good on that one.
And Ricky Lee, of course, the Freddie Blassie taping his bicep with the cane. Freddie Blassie is another class act who had a lot to do with Hogan. That's a good memory there as well. Nick, I'm just gonna ask you: do we want to do some business and talk about what's coming up in the next week or so?
You know what? What's ended here?
Or do we want to just end it? Okay.
We are having. Did you want to plug the birthday party?
Let's at least talk about that.
Party. Don, you coming to the birthday party?
Yeah, you bet you I am.
Next Thursday, July 31st, right, CZ?
1 week from tonight.
It is the card subject to change. Ta-da! Third birthday party. And we will be hanging out at Kavanaugh's Hilltop Bar and Grill in Rock Island. Starting at 6:30. We will do a live podcast at 7. Hope to see you there. There will be raffles, prizes given away. Make sure you get there, get something to eat, hang out for some live wrestling talk. And we couldn't do it without our fans. And we appreciate you guys coming along for the ride as we turn 3. The terrible 2s are almost over, CZ.
That's true. The terrible 2s are almost behind us and onward and upward, right?
Absolutely. Well, we're going to wrap things up here on the Card Subject to Change podcast. I would like to thank our friend, and I think he's going to be coming back a lot here in the future, folks. Hulk Hogan may have passed away today, but I think a star is born with Don Feldman here on the podcast. Great stuff tonight, Don. We appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a fun joy.
Yeah. Stick around here. We'll talk to you after we go off, but thank you so much for joining us. CZ, you got anything else?
I want to thank everybody who tuned in tonight. We appreciate your support and your comments, joining in on the conversation. And I'll just end it with, thank you, Hogan, for everything you did for the business. Like I said off the top, we're not going to talk about the negativity that the man behind the character spread, but definitely a legend in this business that we all love and definitely should be remembered for the great things that he achieved and did for the business, getting it through to the popularity that it has today. But that is going to wrap things up for tonight on this celebratory episode of the life of one Hulk Hogan. We will be back at our normal time, Sunday at 6:30, for another episode of Card Subject to Change. But until then, You guys have a great rest of your
Until
evening.
then, stay.
This has been a For Frequency Sake Podcast Network production. For more great content, subscribe to For Frequency Sake on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.